I wonder what on earth my husband is doing. Today is our precious daughter's wedding day. Most of the guests have already gathered. He said he would come later, but to think he's not here right before the ceremony. I called him for what seemed like the umpteenth time. Finally, my husband answered the call. I finally got through. Where are you now? Me? I'm on a trip with my ex-wife. I was at a loss for words. Of all days, he chose today to do something so despicable. He selfishly told me to make up some excuse for the relatives and hung up. His actions seemed to tarnish our beloved daughter's special day, and I felt terribly upset. It was a week after the ceremony when he called me. Probably because I had been ignoring him, he was very angry. I finally got through. Where are you now? Why should I have to tell you that? Angered by my response, my husband was almost hysterical. He was shouting incoherently. It was understandable for him to lose his composure to this extent. After all, I had razed his house to the ground. My name is Cindy. I am 52 years old. I work part-time at a fresh produce store. Being a plain and quiet type, I was single until I turned 30. I used to think I would never have a chance to get married because of my introverted nature. In my younger days, I lived life looking down, plagued by such negative thoughts. Dan was introduced to me by my mother's high school friend who had passed away early. One day, out of the blue, she contacted me and insisted that I meet him. Thinking it would be just this once, I went to the meeting place and was surprised. He had a child with him. Huh? Didn't you hear? That's troublesome. That old lady is so careless. Dan was holding a baby girl about 1 year old. Her name was Hannah. When Hannah suddenly started crying, she stopped as soon as I held her. Dan's previous wife was quite fickle, having left him for another man. Hannah needs a mother. He asked me to be that mother for her. I agreed to Dan's request. The early days of our marriage were undoubtedly happy. Days flew by, busy with work and caring for our daughter. We lived in my family home at that time. It was a separate house given to me by my father, Tony. It was a bit old but a detached house with a garden, and I remember living there fondly. My days were hectic, commuting between home, work, and the daycare. I think it was when Hannah was about 5 years old that my husband's behavior started to change gradually. He began to ignore my requests and started wandering around idly. Cut it out. If you have time to go out drinking, help out with Hannah and around the house. Don't be stupid. Women should take care of women, and housework is a woman's job. It's always been like that. He ignored me and our daughter. Every weekend, he would go out drinking and come home in the morning. Eventually, he even started smoking again, something he had quit. Hey. The house is going to smell like cigarettes, right? It's not good for Hannah, so please don't smoke. Don't fuss about a cigarette. Really, you're such a nag. If we argued too vehemently, our daughter would end up crying. When he started smoking, I took Hannah and retreated to another room. It's my house, yet why do we have to flee? The house quickly filled with the smell of cigarettes, and I was incredibly frustrated. Unable to tolerate my husband anymore, I decided to consult with my father, Tony. So, the house smells like cigarettes, and my relationship with Dan is getting worse and worse. What should I do? Sorry to bother you with our marital issues. No, thank you for telling me. Call Dan here. I'll talk to him too. When my husband visited my father's house with me, he was visibly nervous. My father was a wealthy man with considerable influence in many areas at the time. My husband knew this well and was frightened by being summoned. His company's superiors also told him not to displease my father. My father's voice was grave as he prefaced that it's wrong to interfere in a married couple's issues. You really should quit smoking. Dan, it's not good for your health, and of course, not for Cindy and Hannah either. Could you please not make my daughter sad? Yes. I'm sorry. Thanks to you, father-in-law, I've come to my senses. After being scolded by my father, my husband acknowledged his faults. He sincerely apologized to me and our daughter, and the atmosphere became more harmonious after that. However, once we got home, it was back to normal. He started smoking secretly again. Moreover, he began visiting my father alone, saying he had business to discuss with him. He mentioned he had some business plans he wanted to undertake and was consulting with him. Though I felt uneasy, since my father said nothing, I let it be. When Hannah had just started junior high, I discovered my husband's affair. Moreover, when I confirmed it through a detective agency, it turned out the other woman was apparently his ex-wife. To start a relationship again with a woman he had divorced, what kind of nerve was that? The ex-wife's name was Sandra. She was quite a beauty. I wondered why he would divorce such a beautiful woman. Anyway, I didn't want to trouble my daughter, who was at a sensitive age, with her parents' romantic relationships. When I was alone with my husband, I showed him the photographic evidence of his affair and sternly warned him. I already know about the affair. And it seems like the other person is your ex-wife. You. Did you take these pictures secretly? Did you really go to such lengths? Don't laugh. I'm being serious here. Please, don't do this anymore. Talk to her then. She keeps insisting on getting back together. Everyone around me. Why are all the women around me so selfish? Angry, my husband stormed off despite my attempts to stop him. I feel like he just snapped at me to evade the issue somehow. I needed to investigate more about how my husband and his ex-wife reignited their relationship. Yet, this situation is absolutely not normal. Shouldn't he normally distance himself from his ex-wife, considering his current family? I am his current partner. I want him to act with our daughter and me in mind first. That's what I pleaded. But every time we talk about it, my husband just makes an annoyed face. He won't take it seriously. Gradually, I grew to dislike him more, and our marriage quickly cooled. When I asked him to stop the affair, he retorted, "Tell her that." Thinking there was no end to this, I decided to meet with the ex-wife. I sent a letter to the address confirmed by the detective agency and called her out to a cafe. I will never forget the shock of meeting her for the first time. As soon as she saw me, she smiled triumphantly, as if to say she was far superior as a woman. "What do you want to talk about?" "I'm quite busy, so please make it quick." "Yes, you seem busy. You must appease many men, right? It must be hard managing several at once. I'd like to learn your scheduling tips." "What? Did you call me here to fight?" "If that's what you want, I'll oblige." I was taken aback by her comment, probably because she looked down on me from the first contact. Uncharacteristically, I snapped and made a sarcastic remark. This wasn't right. I came here to have a rational discussion today. Regaining my composure, I apologized to the ex-wife for my rude remarks. "I'm sorry. My way of speaking was inappropriate. I didn't mean it that way. Anyway, please don't see my husband anymore. It's not good for Hannah's education." "Oh, that's what this is about. Well then, prepare $50,000 as a settlement." "Settlement money? Why do I have to pay that? Aren't you the daughter of a wealthy family? Just cough it up." "Oh, you can't? Wasn't this for Hannah's education?" "No. Was your love for your daughter just lip service, then?" What a spiteful woman. I didn't want to be lectured about love by someone who had abandoned her daughter. From the ex-wife's behavior, I could feel jealousy and anger towards me, being the daughter of a wealthy family. Her life story came to mind, abandoned by her delinquent parents and shuffled among relatives. In the end, our discussion led nowhere. The ex-wife left without even paying for her coffee. When I told my husband that I had met with his ex-wife, he simply said, "Oh, really?" I was very angry. Strange things started happening at home around the time I met the ex-wife at the cafe. Things frequently went missing. My clothes, bags, shoes, and jewelry disappeared. Thinking this was odd, I confronted my husband, and he replied that he just borrowed them. Borrowed? You can't just borrow them without permission. What did you do with them? Did you lend them to another woman? It's not Sandra, is it? Huh? Who cares? It's none of your business. It is my business. Try to understand how I feel having my belongings borrowed without permission. What happened to them after they were borrowed? Unfortunately, the missing items never returned. I even spotted the same items on an online auction site. No matter how persistently I asked my husband, he just shook his head, saying he didn't know or remember, and in the end, he just got angry. I started to keep my belongings in locked chests, drawers, and closets. Speaking of keys, the key to the cottage also disappeared one day. The key to the cottage I sometimes used during my single days, borrowed from my father. When I questioned my husband, he reported after the fact that he had been using it for a change of scenery. The thought that it might have been used as a substitute for a hotel sent chills down my spine. Our marital bond continued to drift apart. The only thing that kept us connected was our daughter's presence. Finally, my daughter was about to get married. Her partner was a senior from her university club, 3 years her senior. He was already working and had been transferred far away. During their relationship, there was talk of her marrying and following him after graduating from university. I sincerely congratulated my daughter, who wanted to have the wedding right after her graduation. Hannah, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Thanks, Mom. It's all thanks to you. I'm really sorry. Because of Dad, you've had such a hard time until now. But you always endured it for me. I understand everything. That's why I'm so grateful. Hannah. It's okay. It's not something you should worry about. This is a problem between Dad and Mom. Just focus on your remaining student life and have a happy marriage, okay? Yes. Thank you so much, Mom. To be honest, I regret marrying my husband. But meeting my daughter was different. I am very happy to have become her mother. When this child becomes independent and builds a happy family, that will be my closure. I've decided to divorce my husband. Amidst my daughter's marriage talk, that's what I was thinking about. Later, my daughter graduated from university in 4 years. After marriage, she plans to support her husband as a full-time homemaker. On the day of the wedding, my daughter and I arrived at the venue ahead of time. Dressed in her wedding gown and made up, how beautiful my daughter was. I was moved to tears just looking at her. I couldn't wait for the ceremony to start. But then, I wonder what on earth my husband is doing. He said he would come later, but he hadn't shown up at the venue even just before the ceremony started. I called his mobile phone dozens of times right before the opening. Finally, my husband answered the call. I finally got through. Where are you now? Me? I'm on a trip with my ex-wife. I was at a loss for words. Of all days, he chose today to do something so despicable. On a trip with his ex-wife? How dare he be so brazen? I felt my head boiling with anger. Well, just make up some excuse to the relatives. Hey. Do you understand? It's your daughter's wedding today. I know. Say congratulations to Hannah for me, see ya. What a selfish man. The worst. I almost slammed my smartphone on the floor. But I couldn't lose my composure. My daughter's wedding was about to begin. I lied, saying that my husband couldn't come due to a sudden emergency. I kept a calm smile, but inside, I was in turmoil. I felt like I was going to explode with anger towards my husband. 1 week after the ceremony, my smartphone rang with a call from my husband for the first time in a while. I ignored it because it was annoying, but he kept calling persistently. It was a barrage of calls. Reluctantly, I answered, and as expected, he was extremely angry. I finally got through. Where are you right now? Why do I have to tell you that? It's none of your business. It is my business. I'm your husband, aren't I? He was so arrogant. My infuriated husband was nearly hysterical. He was screaming incoherently. But it was somewhat understandable that he would lose his composure. After all, I had razed his residence to the ground. You're telling me there's no house when I get back? What did you do? It was old, so I just demolished it. Of course, I consulted with my father thoroughly. A contractor he knows cleared it in 2 days. I'm thinking of putting that land up for sale. What about my belongings? There were clothes and all sorts of things, right? You didn't just throw them away or sell them, did you? If you did, I won't forgive you. You're one to talk, taking people's things without permission and lending or selling them. But don't worry. All your belongings are safely stored somewhere. My husband sighed with relief. He must have been very worried about what had happened to his belongings. He must have been anxious that I might have disposed of them. He barked, demanding to know where they were stored and to have them returned quickly. Everything was going as planned. I laid out my conditions. If you want to know, please divorce me first. What? Divorce. What are you talking about? Do you think it's okay for Hannah to have only one parent? I'm astounded. How long do you plan to keep saying that? Hannah is already a grown adult. It's ridiculous to try to tie me down now by bringing up our child. Of course, my daughter is aware that I intend to initiate the divorce. I have already consulted with my father. There's no need to hesitate to expel this man from my life. Accept the divorce with me. We'll talk after that. If you really hate the idea, then you will lose all your important possessions. Do you want to stay married to me that badly? Nonsense. Who would want to be with a woman like you? I thought so. Sandra is prettier, after all. So, what will you do? Will you accept the divorce? Or throw away all your possessions? I'd like you to decide quickly. Okay, fine. I'll divorce if that's what you want. Let's get divorced. Apparently, my husband had been vaguely thinking about my father's inheritance. Staying married to me might someday lead to a fortune. But my father is still very robust. He has the aura of someone who could live to be 100. We don't know when that someday will come, and our discord is accelerating. He made his decision after considering various things like cost-benefit calculations and future predictions. That was the atmosphere. I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want. Where are you living now? I'll come over. You want the address? There's no way I'm telling you. It would be terrible if you showed up or started stalking me. I'll contact you again later about when and where we can meet. Acting all high and mighty. Who do you think you are, Cindy? You better remember this. You should think carefully about whether you're in a position to raise your voice like that. Do you understand how angry I am after all the selfish things you've done? My husband had been too self-centered and ignored my feelings. As a result, our relationship had deteriorated beyond repair. Every time I tried to reach out for the sake of our daughter, it was he who pushed me away. He and his still-connected ex-wife deserved some form of punishment. A few days later, I called my husband and told him to bring his ex-wife to my father's house. When they arrived on the appointed day, my husband and his ex-wife were acting suspiciously. Like stray cats who had unknowingly wandered into someone else's territory. Confused and frightened, they didn't know how to behave. They should have been more confident. But maybe it was too much to ask. Sitting before them, my father had a grim expression. It looked like he was about to strike them with lightning. Even the ex-wife, meeting my father for the first time, could feel his intimidating presence. Before we talk about the divorce, there are a few things I need to confirm. Dan, you were using our cottage without permission, weren't you? Along with Sandra here, right? That, well. I was using it, but it wasn't without permission, right? Cindy, you knew, didn't you? Don't make it sound like I gave you permission. You took the keys and used it without asking, and I only found out unilaterally later, right? It seems you two trashed our cottage every time, right? You never cleaned up properly, did you? Oh, well. I meant to clean up next time I used it. When I received a call from the cottage management company about the state of the rooms, I was shocked. My husband and his ex-wife had left all sorts of trash behind, letting the room fall into disarray. Planning to clean up next time? That's obviously a lie. They probably thought it would be fine for me or someone from the management company to clean up after them. Also, it seems that some equipment was damaged by being hit, and the floors and tables are dirty with residues of drinks and food, and I was told that it generally smells like cigarettes. You smoked in that cottage? I had placed a valuable painting I bought in my youth there. Dad, about that. The paintings you collected are no longer displayed in that cottage. It seems these two sold them on an online auction. What? What have you done? After all the trouble I went through to collect them. I was shocked when I learned about it too. That my husband and his ex-wife would go so far as to do that. My father's lament over his precious painting collection being sold was profound. When my father called my husband by his name, it was with fierce anger. My husband was flustered. What's this about? Did I give you the paintings from the cottage? I don't recall such a conversation. Did I? I'm very sorry. It was a moment of folly. The return of the paintings or compensation for the damage. Compensation for the broken equipment and costs for restoring the cottage to its original state. All of these expenses were to be charged to my husband. My father declared this solemnly. What else could my husband do but nod? And yet, my father's words did not end there. Dan, you received a loan from me. Remember? Yes. You lent me about $50,000. What did you do with it? Wasn't it for that new business you talked about? There hasn't been any follow-up. It hasn't fallen through, has it? Well, how should I put it? My husband was stammering. It seemed he was having difficulty saying something. He was sweating profusely and couldn't keep his gaze steady. Seeing my husband's pitiful state, my father sighed with exasperation. Tell me the truth. That business venture was a lie, wasn't it? You obtained the loan under false pretenses. If you didn't know, I'll tell you now that what you did could be considered fraud. No, it's not like that. Father-in-law. I didn't mean it. Was the business plan also a lie? The crime of fraud is serious. You could be imprisoned for up to 10 years. There's no fine, only a sentence. If convicted, you will definitely be incarcerated and subjected to forced labor. I'm sorry. Father-in-law, I lied. Finally, my husband apologized. He must have realized that lies and excuses wouldn't work anymore. He admitted that the business plan was a lie. It seems he used the loan for something else. Used it for something else? What exactly did you spend it on? That is, this woman begged me, and I used it to pay off her debts. What? You used the money I entrusted to you for such a thing. Hey. Traitor. We agreed you wouldn't mention that, didn't we? His ex-wife raised her voice. My husband retorted as if it couldn't be helped. My father sighed deeply. I was too appalled to speak. He paid off his ex-wife's debts with the money he lied to obtain? Unbelievable. How could someone be so unreasonable? Whether it's true or not, that the ex-wife begged my husband is just typical of her. She has no right to criticize him. Both were just two despicable people. At that moment, the living room door quietly opened. It was my daughter, Hannah. She had asked to join today's discussion after being told about it. She had been listening to our exchange for a while and looked utterly disgusted. Whether the ex-wife realized how Hannah felt or not, she stood up looking pleased. Hannah. Isn't that Hannah? Did you come too? I've missed you. I'm your mom. Can you not? You're not my mom. I'm grateful that you gave birth to me, but that's it. I refuse to be considered family by someone like you. Hannah. How can you speak like that to your biological mother? That's why I'm telling you she's not my mom. You abandoned your daughter's wedding to go on a cheating trip with your ex-wife. Don't act like a father now. It's only natural for my daughter to be angry. She had already harbored resentment towards her father. This latest escapade with his affair trip was the last straw for her. Now, both her father and his ex-wife seemed like nothing but enemies to her. Just so you know, because I don't think you're aware, my husband is the nephew of the chairman of the parent company you work for. They're very close and he's held in high regard. The chairman's. Hannah, why didn't you tell me something so important? I meant to. It's your fault for not listening. But whatever, it doesn't matter now. I'm cutting ties with you as a parent. Hannah, how can you say that? My daughter knows all too well how much suffering my husband has caused me. She herself has endured as much unpleasantness. Her resentment towards her father is substantial. Hannah declared she would tell her husband everything, and my husband turned pale. Please don't. What if the chairman gives me a hard look? Then he should. You've done enough to deserve it, haven't you? If you ask me, as your daughter, you're the lowest as a person, a parent, and a man. Hannah, stop it, don't speak to your father like that. Don't act like a mother. I will never acknowledge you two as my parents. My husband's dreadful behavior will surely reach the chairman through my daughter's husband. Then it will go from the chairman to the president, and from the president to his direct supervisors, affecting his reputation within the company. My husband was already almost in tears. But it was too late for regrets. There was no stopping my daughter now. She then turned her sharp gaze to her biological mother as well. I heard from Mom that you've had other men besides my father. Several of them. And you've been deceiving them about your age to keep the relationships going, haven't you? Well, I won't say it's not true, but the thought that I share blood with someone like you makes living painful for me. Promise me you'll never show your face to me again. Understood. I understand. The ex-wife's face was drawn with weakness. My daughter was likely seen as a safety net by her, something to fall back on if needed. But that plan had failed. My daughter utterly despised her biological mother. Once hated, it's over, whether she's the biological mother or not. I decided to deliver the final blow to the weakened ex-wife as well. I'll be informing your affair partner's partners about your infidelity, is that okay? What? Hey. Stop. What right do you have to do that? If you don't like it, then compensate for the damages my father and I suffered. Share the responsibility with him. Me, with Dan. Why is she surprised at that? Did she think she could escape trouble alone? The items sold without my permission. The cottage trashed. And the emotional damage. The harm we've suffered from my husband and his ex-wife is significant. I declared my intention to hire a lawyer to compile the details of the damages and demand compensation. While my husband signed the divorce papers, his head hanging low, the ex-wife continued to sob. The divorce between my former husband and me was finalized a few days later. I gave him the security code for the storage unit and charged him for the usage period as well. How worthless he was as a husband and father, causing nothing but trouble for his wife and child. His true nature reached the president through my son-in-law and the chairman, and it spread rapidly within the company. Especially shocking to the employees was the fact that he had gone on an affair trip with his ex-wife on the day of our daughter's wedding. Unthinkable as a parent. Demented as a person. Such bad reputations spread far and wide. If the employees were that abuzz, it certainly reached the ears of the business contacts. That there was such a despicable man in the company. With rumors growing more scandalous, my ex-husband was cornered. He resigned half a year after our divorce, likely because he couldn't stand being ostracized. However, he couldn't just move to another company and start anew due to his age. Reemployment wasn't so straightforward. Despite applying to numerous companies, he couldn't find a job, and time just kept passing. He was facing a claim for damages from my father and owed me compensation. He had no savings. My ex-husband struggled to make ends meet, got caught shoplifting, and repeatedly needed police intervention. The ex-wife seemed to be living terribly as well. She was jointly liable with my ex-husband for the payments to my father and me. The ex-wife tried unsuccessfully to get her lovers to cough up the necessary money. She moved too boldly, and her infidelity came to light to the partners of her lovers. As a result, she faced demands for compensation from many sides, making her life even harder, and she was forced to find work, having been unemployed until then. She tried to leverage her looks in the nightlife industry, but it proved difficult. A woman in her 50s entering as a newcomer and surviving wasn't as sweet as it sounded. Being strong-willed, the ex-wife clashed with the younger hostesses and was ostracized everywhere she went. Eventually, she had no choice but to turn to my ex-husband, moving into his apartment and living a meager existence. One day, the two of them appeared in front of me as I was returning from work, pleading about how hard they were struggling. Every day, I'm barely scraping by, working 2 or 3 part-time jobs. Me too. I can't even afford to go to the hair salon or buy new clothes. Hey Cindy, please. Help us. Just letting us talk to your father would be enough. He just turns us away at the gate. Even though it's about a new business, he won't listen. As he should. What new business? Who would believe such a lie now? Despite my ex-husband's fervent defense that it wasn't a lie, I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. Even if his story were true, neither my father nor I had any desire to listen. I hated my ex-husband deeply and didn't even want to see his face. When I candidly expressed these thoughts, he began to cry. The ex-wife was already crying. It was pitiful to see 2 grown adults tearfully lamenting in the streets at dusk. You brought this on yourselves. Now go away. Both of you, never appear before me again. When I sternly told them this, both looked down slightly. The way they turned their backs to me and walked away looked so lonely. But I felt no sympathy for them. On the contrary, I thought they got what they deserved. I hoped they would continue to regret their actions and taste the bitterness of a life burdened with debt. Later, my daughter had a child. Now, she sends me photos of my grandchild almost every day. Although there's no blood relation, that child is undoubtedly precious to me. From now on, I intend to continue watching over the happiness of my daughter and her family from a distance. Having been involved with such a worthless man, I wasted a significant part of my precious life. However, I am grateful that I was given the chance to meet my daughter. For my daughter and for my grandchild, I plan to live healthily and happily from now on.